Okay, we have Katie here who's going to answer some questions about Game of Thrones, which is an epic fantasy series going on right now. Um, why can Game of Thrones be considered in league with epic fantasy series like, say, Lord of the Rings?
I think a lot of it has to do with I think it was maybe a Time magazine article, some article called The Author of Game of Thrones, the American Cult Tolkien, and that kind of caught on. I think that most people who are really invested in a fantasy, though, don't really think that's the case. They're pretty different series. They have different points of view and different things that they're known for. Like Lord of the Rings tends to have like very black and white. These are the good guys. These are the bad guys. And I feel like what's really interesting about Game of Thrones is that there's kind of like the shades of gray with the characters. But what makes it such a good series and like why a lot of people like it is because of the intricate world that the author creates, I think. Because it is really different from a lot of other fantasy series because it feels like a real place that might have a little bit of magic in it versus a world that just has constant magic. And also, I think just the idea that there's no good guys or bad guys, really. Or if there's very few pure good guys or bad guys. It's kind of like all shades of gray.
Okay. I know that when I found out that these were written by an American, I was really surprised. And so do you think, is that something that's so shocking for a lot of people? Just because it seems to be so based on, British history.
You know, it's not surprising to me because I feel like Americans sometimes are even more drawn to British history just because it's kind of new and novel. And I know I've always been really interested in British history, so it doesn't really surprise me. And you can't have the same kind of epic sweeping fantasy that's set in I don't know, colonial Williamsburg. That just would seem that would just not make sense by the fantasy conventions. So it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't really surprise me.
So what are some British things you've seen on this trip that you saw and then you thought of the books because they were in there too?
I feel like just the history that we've learned about is kind of because these books are largely historically based, even though they are fantasy books. So learning about the War of the Roses, a lot of that kind of stuff is very familiar based on the books. Just a lot of the sigils you'll see because the book talks a lot about different sigils and mottos of different families. And also probably going to Northern Ireland because that's where they film it. So that was kind of exciting. And I was like, yeah, the sky really is that gray in Northern Ireland. It really does look like that. That's cool. And it's different being there versus reading about it.
And so what do you think, how do you think the image of the stories changed after they made it into an HBO show? Do you think it made it more American seeming or...
I don't know. I mean, it made it a lot more popular seeming. It definitely is targeted towards an audience versus just what an author wanted to write. Probably it is more American just because I think there's a kind of a reputation for spectacle in American TV shows and kind of making things over the top. And the books were already kind of over the top, but they added in stuff that makes it even more so.
And why are they so powerful for you? Why the stories?
I don't know. I just think they're fun. I don't think I take them too... I get really invested in them, but I don't think I take them too seriously. It's more just a fun thing to read. And I just think I like history enough where it kind of reminds me of historical things that I've liked too. And I personally like them just because I don't like black and white characters and all the characters are kind of flawed. And so I think that's interesting because I haven't read that many fantasy series, but the other ones I have read, they tend to have the good guys and the bad guys, and I think that's usually boring. So that's probably what drew me to the series.